Let's just dive right into it. Today we're unpacking a seriously chilling piece of local folklore. This explainer is going to take us deep into a terrifying scenario, one where desperate everyday survival collides head-on with pure supernatural horror. Imagine, if you will, a village deeply divided by fear and greed. On one side, life just kind of carries on normally, but on the other, there sits this dense, forbidden forest. It makes you wonder, right? What really happens to those who vanish in the dark waters hidden within those woods? Fishermen wander into the trees seeking a catch, and, well, they're simply never seen again. Part 1. The Burden of Survival. Now, our protagonist, Ronnie's story, isn't just your standard ghost tale. It kicks off with the sudden, completely unexplained disappearance of her seasoned fisherman father. He went out to the waters one day and just vanished without a trace. Suddenly, at literally just 13 years old, 13, Ronnie is forced to bear this massive burden. She alone has to support her sick mother. The sheer weight of that financial and emotional responsibility, that's exactly what pushes her toward the unthinkable. So she's facing this incredibly cruel dilemma. The safe, populated main river, well, that's completely controlled by greedy rival fishermen. And they outright ban her from their waters. I mean, they definitely don't want a young girl cutting into their profits. So what choice does a desperate 13-year-old really have? She's basically forced down the only other path available, a dark, forbidden forest river. It's totally isolated, untouched, and heavily shrouded in the most terrifying rumors.
Part 2. Entering the Forbidden Forest. Okay, so Rani crosses the threshold. She steps away from the safety of her village and into these terrifying unknown woods, and the atmosphere shifts instantly. You can almost feel the dread building with every single step she takes into a place she's lived near her entire life, but never dared to enter. Before he vanished, her father gave her this really haunting piece of advice. He said, "The river shows what we think and remember." We really have to hold on to that quote. It perfectly plants a psychological seed for the horrors that are about to unfold. Does the forest actively feed on her own trauma and grief?
The environment here is intensely sensory and honestly suffocating. Even right in the middle of the day, the forest stays wrapped in this claustrophobic, completely unnatural darkness. You've got the constant, eerie screeching of bats filling the air overhead, mixed with the subtle sounds of snakes slithering just out of sight. It's absolutely a place designed to isolate and terrify, totally cutting Ronnie off from the sunlit world she knows.
Part 3. Warnings from the water. Now she finally reaches the riverbank. And this is where the rules of reality slowly begin to shatter. She looks down into the water just to take a drink, but she doesn't see her own reflection. No, she sees her missing father's face, staring right back at her. Startled, she loses her balance and tumbles into the deep water. Immediately, and I mean instantly, some unseen force grabs her ankle, trying to drag her under. She's thrashing, kicking wildly, and somehow manages to narrowly escape. But as she's catching her breath on the muddy bank, her father's familiar red scarf, his gamcha, comes ominously floating down the river right toward her. And if that wasn't terrifying enough, she reaches into her supplies for some bait. Inside her bag, she makes this absolute heart-stopping discovery. A photograph of her father. But it's been defaced. His eyes are violently scratched out. And the most chilling part of all this, she never packed this photo. It was placed there. In this exact moment, Ronnie realizes a malicious, evil presence is standing right beside her. Part 4. The Horrifying Truth. Panic completely takes over. Ronnie realizes she has to abandon the spot right then and there. She rushes to pull her heavy fishing net out of the water so she can just flee this cursed place. But the net is incredibly heavy. Abnormally heavy. She's struggling with all her might to haul it onto the bank. As that dripping, heavy net finally breaches the surface, brace yourselves, what exactly did she pull from the dark river? The reveal is an absolute, visceral shock. Tangled inside the ropes of the net is her missing father. But he is dead, and his corpse is terribly mutilated. His torso has been viciously bitten in half, literally exactly as if he had been consumed by a massive, ravenous wild animal. The absolute nightmare she feared most is lying right in front of her in the mud. But guys, the horror isn't over. Rising slowly from the depths of the river is the entity responsible for all of this, a grotesque river witch. Picture this, she has thick, mossy hair, massive razor-sharp teeth, and a rotting, decaying body. This bloody, deeply sinister smile is just plastered across her face. And as Ronnie watches in sheer horror, the witch's mere presence begins to turn the blue river water entirely red.
Part 5. The lifelong trauma. Ronnie lets out a scream of unimaginable terror and just runs for her life, fleeing the woods and leaving her father and that cursed forest behind forever. But the tragic aftermath of her survival is pretty bleak. When she finally made it back to the village, nobody believed her story. They dismissed it entirely. Today, she survives by selling vegetables from a street cart. She's completely abandoned her family's generational trade. Internally, though, she remains paralyzed by lifelong PTSD, haunted by relentless waking nightmares of that bloody smile in the water.
Which really brings us to a final chilling thought to wrap up this explainer. You know, that forest remains completely untouched to this day. The rival fishermen still avoid it, just like they always have. So, you've got to ask yourself, does the river witch still wait in those dark, isolated waters for the very next desperate soul to wander in? It's a terrifying question, and one that perfectly captures the enduring power of these local legends. Thanks so much for joining me today, and we'll see you next time.